Rolling down to old Maui, the boys rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward bound from the Arctic, rolling down to old Maui. Welcome. Today we're talking ships. We're going to go maritime all the way. And we're going to go down to Victoria, to the Maritime Museum there, and talk to Barry Gough. We're also going to spend some time here in Cowichan Bay taking a look around, and I've got my good friend Chuck McCandless with me today. He's going to sing some songs with me, and we're going to have some fun. Say hello to the people, Chuck.
Hello everyone, thank you, welcome aboard.
All right, and so come along and let's see what we can find. Lucas boat got high topsail, me boys. Lucas boat got high topsail, she's a flash with copper nail. Me boys are riding, the boys are riding. Lucas boat is painted green, me boys. Lucas boat is painted green, it's the prettiest boat you've ever seen. Me boys are riding, me boys are riding. Rolling out his grub, me boys. Lucas rolling out his grub, wants to be in a 10-pound tub. Me boys are riding, me boys are riding.
You're rolling. I'm just going to back off a little. I got your long shot.
She went down last October in a parking driving rain. Skipper who'd been drinking, maybe felt no pain. Too close to 3 Mile Rock, she was down her morning blow. Marianne and Carter said hello. There were 5 of us aboard her when she finally was awash. We worked like hell to save her, all heedless of the cost. And the crew she gave, she went down, caused us to remain. Marianne Carter rise again. Hi, we're here today in the Maritime Museum, and we're going to talk about ships in 1788 and 89, when my first book takes place. And we're lucky today to have with us noted historian, BC historian Barry Gough. Barry, how are you doing?
Fine.
Good,
Thanks
good.
so much for having me.
Yes, well, you're very welcome. And here behind us, we've got a picture of George Vancouver, who was in our neighborhood in the sort of times we're talking about. He was here in 1792. But what I'd like to talk today is mostly about what it would have been like to be a sailor. You're off in Macau in China, and this character named John Mears comes along and wants to hire you onto his ship.
Well, it was a tough life. I
Yeah.
mean, this was not for the faint of heart. These chaps were rough and tumble. They'd left home. They had survived by their wits. They were poorly paid, but they saw the world. I mean, what more could you ask for? Nowadays, people are so stuck with their own jobs, they're afraid to move.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
these fellows went to sea. They went as young men, probably as teenagers. They survived all of that.
They must have been an adventurous sort, like you say.
Well, they needed work.
Yeah.
The lure of the sea was obviously passionate for them.
Mm-hmm.
There was adventure in the wind, so to speak, but they needed work too.
Right.
And they lived short lives.
They did.
They knew that they were probably going to die at age 40.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have family. They sailed the seas, 7 seas, as careers, but they could go from China up to Siberia, to Kamchatka. They might find themselves in Sitka, Alaska. They might find themselves in California.
Right.
Down to San Diego, to the lures of Hawaii or Tahiti, which is the best place in the Pacific, right? For a reason.
Them coconut fronds and their tropic lands, we soon shall see again. 16 months we passed away in the cold Kamchatka Sea. Now we're homeward bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. Rolling down to old Maui, my boys, rolling down to old Maui. We're homeward bound from the Arctic around, rolling down to old Maui. And that was really the triangle, the Sandwich Islands to the
Yeah.
northwest coast. That was the route.
But it was totally predicated on the sea otter. If we didn't have sea otter here, they wouldn't have come.
Oh, exactly. And it was a wonder. It was like soft gold.
It was.
Really. It was very transportable, and it was worth a fortune. It's interesting how the prices fluctuated. I noticed when the captain's cook men first got there, they were getting what was equivalent to about 90, say, American dollars per pelt. When Mears got back, he was selling them for about $60 per pelt. And then a few years later, they were down to almost $30, $15 a pelt. So
Yes.
you can see how quickly the market got flooded.
It did get flooded, and it was a question of supply and demand.
Exactly.
And the Chinese had a certain quota that they needed to complete.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the Americans arrive in big numbers. They were the best
Exactly.
of the traders,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
They out-traded the British, and they were out-trading the Russians,
Well,
too.
the Americans had an advantage. They didn't have the strict tariffs and regulations of the East India Company.
They did, and they had smaller ships
That's
and,
right.
and better captains and
Yeah.
better navigators.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in and out. They were flitting in and out of here,
Right.
this part of the world, with the ease that the British, with all their restrictions
Right.
and even larger ships, didn't have to.
And they were, it was fortunate for them, in a strange way, to have had the American Revolution just before, because they built all those ships and got all these mariners, experienced captains and crews that were ready to go and sail and take advantage of these
That's right.
these incredible opportunities.
That's right.
When Gray finally made it back from the northwest coast to Boston, he was lauded as a hero. It was like the biggest thing that an American had actually sailed around the globe. I mean,
Yeah, but
he was like a hero.
For the English, it was old school. I mean,
Absolutely.
they've been around the world several times, but
Yeah.
this is the first time the Stars and Stripes had been paraded around.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
the English had been doing it since the 17th century, thank you very much.
That's right.
And if not, then during the age of Drake and Cavendish, they both sailed around the world.
Exactly.
So the Americans were, they're coming into something, a part of the world that the English already knew.
And it was an interesting mix of forces with the Spanish, because the Spanish had been up and down the coast many times, but they were so secretive about all their findings and their explorations.
Yeah, the Spanish were not going to give anything away.
No,
It
no,
had
not
to be
at all.
pried open.
That's right.
And they neglected their patrimony here.
Well, and they put so much credence under the Papal Bull of 1493 when Pope Alexander VI gave or sold or whatever he did half the world to Spain and half the world to Portugal.
Yes.
I mean, Spain had got away with that argument for so long, but
Yeah.
now in the age of enlightenment, it didn't hold the kind of credibility it did in older days, and they were being challenged.
That's so correct. I think that's a great appreciation. What you say is true. The Spanish and the Portuguese were cheeky, as I call them.
Yes.
Let's divide the world.
Yes.
But the British, they were not going to abide by that. The Americans weren't going to abide by it either. I mean, commerce ruled the world for them.
Exactly.
And so they were going to go anywhere they bloody well wanted to sail, and they did.
And all this culminated in with the start of my first book, which is when Martinez was sent up to take over the territory,
Yes.
and he captured the English ships as prizes, and we had what was to be later known as the Nootka dispute.
Exactly, and it was one of the biggest issues of the day
They
in
actually-
European politics.
William Pitt
Happened right here.
mobilized, and he raised £2 million, which is a huge amount in those days, to go to war with Spain.
Ah, yes, but having a navy was good business in the UK.
It
It was the
yes.
biggest industry of the times.
Absolutely. So it all worked for England, and it gave them an excuse to once and for all settle this question of whether Spain had any right to claiming the whole half of the world because of what the Pope said in 1493.
That's right.
Yeah, and here we've got a Russian expedition, or a Russian ship.
Well, that's one of my favorites.
And let's talk about the Russians, because
That is
we haven't even
absolutely
talked.
one of my favorites,
Yeah.
the Bering
Yeah.
expedition. He's called the Russian Columbus.
Exactly.
He was Danish,
Yeah.
but the Russians, like other smart nations, hire others to do their work when they don't have the talents.
Mm-hmm.
And the Danish were very good about this. And Bering made his expedition to Kamchatka, built his ships there. All the Russian ships of that age before the 19th century were built in Kamchatka.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
either at Tosk or at Kamchatka. They didn't sail them from Europe. They
built
built them
it
on the
Tosk,
spot.
right? Siberia.
And the St. Peter was one of the great ships. And he and his fellow companion, Chirikov,
Yes.
were the two that put Alaska on the map. The Great Land, right? You know, Alaska, the Great Land. And they determined that there was a strait there. They confirmed that there was a strait, which is now called Bering Strait after the great navigator. And James Cook, our famous James Cook, lived in had held Bering in the greatest of majesty. And if you read his account for the 1778 expedition to Bering Sea, he was following in the footsteps of Bering.
Yes.
They
It's
were.
gotta acknowledge-
It would have been wonderful for Cook and Bering to have met up and exchanged points of view.
Yes.
But of course, Bering died on an island off the coast of Kamchatka, you know, and his bones were buried there. But the memory of him and his expedition lives on. He is one of the great mariners of all time.
Lukey's boat. 1, 2, 3. Lukey's boat is painted green. The boys. Lukey's boat is painted green. Prettiest boat you've ever seen. The boys are in like day. The boys are in like day. Lukey's boat got a fine for cutting. The boys. Lukey's boat got a fine for cutting. Never seen a ship. I'd like to talk a little bit about what it would have been like to be a sailor on one of these ships. I mean, navigational aids, they didn't have much. They had a compass, they had the stars, they had the quadrant.
Yes.
What else did they have? That's about it. I mean, they may have primitive thermometers.
Well, they could read the stars.
Yeah,
They could take the watches, do their navigation.
yeah.
They could do dead reckoning, of course.
Right.
But a number of people like Mears, who had been in the Royal Navy, or Charles Duncan, to give you
Yeah,
another
yeah,
example,
yeah.
would have been able to read the stars and use the nautical almanac. Even if they didn't have chronometers on board, they would be able to do astral navigation and
Yes.
determine their longitude that way.
Yeah.
If I might say something by way of comment, everybody thinks that the chronometer is the greatest gift to navigation in the world. But all of these sailors knew how to do astronomical navigation before
Right.
that time.
Yes.
And to use the nautical tables in order to determine their position,
Yeah.
representative of the prime meridian in Greenwich.
Yeah.
But, you know, going to the question of being sailors, I mean, they lived short lives, brutal lives, violent lives, but they were lives of adventure. They had difficult food. I mean, their rations were going to run out. They had to get to the closest agricultural place. They learned to brew spruce beer out of necessity.
Yes,
beer was good because it was transportable. It was
That's
potable.
right. Yeah.
Rum was more expensive, but it was also a self-preservative too.
Absolutely.
And these sailors, they were necessarily alcoholics. They were pickled on feet.
Yes.
And they, this was what kept them going. And the Royal Navy had big rations for rum,
Yeah.
as well as beef. And so the merchant marine had to have it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I remember reading in one of Mears' letters to Duncan that he sent Duncan on the Euphegnia when they wintered in the Sandwich Islands. Mears sent him a still from Macau and encouraged him to make as much rum where he was around sugar as he could.
Oh, that's
For the,
delightful. I didn't know that. That's a wonderful,
Yeah, he actually sent him
wonderful
a still.
story, isn't it? Yes, yes.
Yeah. You wonder how they because
And tobacco's something else that they needed too. And
That's
they must
right.
have got that out of the West Indies and Brazil, or from Virginia, or through their English suppliers. Or maybe they got that in Canton as well.
right.
Because the sailors were big smokers.
Yeah. And what about their clothes? I mean,
They made their own clothes.
That's right.
I think the officers might have had their own gear that was left over from their
Yeah.
days in the Royal Navy,
Right.
or they would have bought officers' outfits in London. But by and large, the sailors were a ragged bunch.
And they came home with a ditty bag. That was about all they had, a little knapsack sort of thing with all their stuff.
Yeah, and of course, when they were up in the Ratlins and going up to the top, they didn't have shoes on, as it's shown in the first Mutiny on the Bounty movie, where you see them going up in silver buckled shoes, you
That's
know,
right, yeah.
McCharlton.
Yeah.
What's that famous first edition of that
Right.
Mutiny on the Bounty? No, they were rough and tumble guys,
Oh,
calloused
absolutely.
hands, calloused feet.
Yeah,
You know, it was a hard regime.
sure. And the discipline was pretty harsh. It had to be. They
It
were
had
on,
to be.
on a boat in the middle of nowhere.
They
really
relied
at,
on
at
one-
the edge of the earth.
Yeah,
really.
and they relied on one another. I mean,
Yes, that's
this
the
is
main
really
thing.
critical, isn't
Yes,
it? That they
it is.
relied on one another.
Like the men in the trenches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They had to be able to call on somebody for assistance.
Yeah.
And they
yeah.
had to know the ropes, as we say, right? They had to,
Absolutely.
if somebody says club hall, everybody needs to know how a club hall is affected.
Exactly.
They couldn't guess.
Talking about
this,
that,
you know?
you look at a boat like this, and it's got 2 lifeboats. I mean, all of them would have had a longboat, they'd call. But they don't have, like the ferries, they don't have like 20 lifeboats. There were maybe 1, maybe 2 boats that they'd have lashed onto their deck.
Yes.
And those were the ones that they'd use to get around the little inlets and anywhere where the bigger ships couldn't go.
Indeed. That's right. That's right.
But that's not much of a lifeline when you look at it. When you
No,
consider
it's
there's-
not. It's not.
There's maybe 100 sailors on board, and that would
Yeah.
probably take 20.
And it's important to know that apart from the copper and iron fittings, everything else is organic.
Yes,
You know, the wood,
yeah,
the oakum, the tar, the pitch, the hemp, it's all organic. And it suffers from wear and tear, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't have the longevity that nylon braided or silk braided rope would have. And there might have been
Exactly.
silk on board too, but
yeah,
that's an important thing to remember, that things did happen. Cook lost a mast when he comes out of Hawaii and has to go back. This was happening with the merchant ships on this coast as well. They were
Yep.
losing their rigging, getting caught in the
all
storms.
the time, yeah.
And, you know, off this coast, in the winter months, with a lot of gales, and this is a very treacherous coast.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, a lot of wear and tear on ships of that age. Yeah.
It's remarkable how they could fix ships, too. On Colnet's voyage, they grounded a few times. They had terrible damage to the structure of the ship. They just finally put it on some beach of sand.
Yep.
And the carpenter goes to work, and I don't know how they do it, but they fix these ships.
Yes, they
Yeah,
crane
get
them, crane them down. Just north of Yukon, there was a famous inlet on Nootka Island. It was about 3 miles north of Yukon, where the Boston traders and the other traders came in there. I've forgotten the name of that
Right.
little harbor. You'd know it yourself, but it became a famous greenage place.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, they had to be inventive.
absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
it was a tough thing.
And it's amazing also how Mears brought in his, on the second voyage, when he actually came to Nootka and stayed and built a ship. He built a ship with the Chinese artisans.
Yeah.
And they brought I guess the main parts in frame, but the rest they hewed out of the woods around them. It's just incredible.
Yes.
The first ship ever built on the Northwest Coast was called the Northwest America.
That's right.
Which Mears built. And it was a lovely little 45-ton ship. It was ideal for going around the little inlet, inside and getting closer.
Yes.
Where the bigger ships would be.
Yes, exactly so. And the Americans, when Gray and Kendrick are here, they build a small
That's
vessel
right.
like that. The Adventure, I
The
think it's
Adventure,
called.
that's right.
And they built that at Mears Island.
That's right.
And it's the same sort of size, essential size.
Yeah.
It's built over the course of the winter.
Right.
And the next year, it's plying the coast in
That's
search
right.
of furs.
And they were, it was a beautiful ship, both of these, the Northwest America, because Martinez, one of the first things he made sure was that he got his hands on that ship. He stole it took it from
Yes.
as his prize and used it for his own expeditions.
Well, that's right.
Yeah,
They were handy vessels,
Yes.
and they required fewer sailors, of
Right,
course,
right.
a smaller complement, so they were more
Absolutely.
nimble.
that's right,
Right?
yeah.
It's essential.
And manpower was a big thing. Martinez was always trying to he'd hire Englishmen or anyone he could get that had any experience. You know, you might be one day in the British Navy and have an argument, and then you'd go see Martinez and get hired on. You're in the Spanish Navy.
I'm very fond of John Mears.
Yes.
He gets himself into trouble
Yes, he
of his
does.
own making, but
That's right.
he's a very competent sailor.
A very competent sailor and a very brave man. You know,
And a good writer.
What gets, yeah, that's right. What gets me most about Mears is that he came back after that first voyage where he went up and he lost one of his ships, which was called the Sea Otter. It was never seen again. And then he lost so many of his men getting stuck up there in Prince William Sound.
Yeah.
And it didn't deter him. Like most people would go be whipped with their tail between their legs, but he came back the next year. It didn't seem to stop him at all.
Yes,
Amazing.
I wrote up also in my book, The Northwest Coast, about how the British government used him.
Exactly.
He made a testimonial before the Privy Council Board of Trade.
That's right.
About the nature of the trade on our coast.
Which Pitt used to get the impetus to go to threaten
the
war
Brits
with
then
Spain.
used that as
That's
sworn testimonial evidence
That's
to
right.
put the position to Madrid.
Yes.
Hey, get out of this property, it's not yours exclusively.
That's right.
Important.
Pretty
So he
amazing.
was convenient.
Yes.
Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and make a northwest passage to the sea. Westward from the Davis Strait, 'tis there 'twas said to lie, a sea route to the Orient for which so many died, seeking golden glory, leaving weathered broken bones, and a long forgotten lonely cairn of stones. 16th century, but it's probably about the same technologies that
And of
our
course,
boys
the
would be
great
working.
sword, which is uniformly now for ceremonial purposes,
Right.
but in days gone by, an
It was-
absolute essential
Oh, absolutely.
item for going on board of the enemy.
Right, because when you're in armed combat, you've got one shot, and then you'd have to load. It would take too long. So once you've shot your shot, basically up to swords, which makes me think of how I got really into the whole seafaring life. At first, as a boy, was Errol Flynn in Captain Blood. I mean, here was
That
this
is
guy.
essential education.
Essential education. Here's this guy, he was like a superhero, and he swung on ropes, sort of like Tarzan, and he had a great hat, and he was always, sword fighting and saving the damsel. I thought Errol Flynn was one of the...
Captain Blood is still one of the greatest books of that era.
It
It's still
is.
widely read.
Yes,
It's wonderful.
it isn't it wonderful?
And you've got boarding pikes here too.
Yes.
They're essential for keeping the
invaders
people
off.
trying to clamber on board.
That's
It's
right.
very useful.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
What are those again?
Boarding pikes.
Boarding pike.
Yeah.
Or you could use them as an offensive weapon, but as a defensive weapon.
Yeah. Okay, now right over here we've got what we've all been talking about is the sea otter pelt. This is what the reason that all this happened.
Yes, the sea otter pelt is the ermine invasion.
We're talking about the sea otter pelt, which is what started the whole Northwest the merchants like Mears over
It
here.
was the first fur rush of the North Pacific, and
Right.
of course it was hunted to death, right?
Yeah, pretty cool.
But it has recovered all the way from Kamchatka and Japanese islands, all the way around the coast of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska, all the way down through Haida Gwaii, and now down to Alta California, Northern California.
I know.
But, only 100 years ago it was virtually killed to extinction.
I know, and it's incredible what they're finding now about when the sea otter comes back to an area, how it brings the whole area back to life.
Right.
By getting rid of all the sea urchins.
It does.
That,
It's a bottom
kelp
feeder.
is now allowed to grow again, and all the fish come back. But
Yeah.
without the sea otter, the sea urchin or the sea urchins, they just they took over.
Was you and there was I, and there were thousands leaving Liverpool the time before we up and sailed that day. When the Corinthia we put to sea, she delivered us to destiny, so we could be together here away.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
Another age, I dare say, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And it was only 300 years ago. It's incredible to think that.
Nowadays, we're so hidebound with regulation, we'd never be able to sail those kinds of ships in our own waters. These famous ships
Yes.
would not meet all the requirements that the provincial and federal governments are now putting in.
We'll talk about the natives going whaling. I mean, Work Safe BC would have a field day. They wouldn't let them know what those canoes.
Red tape.
That's right. Well, it's a different world today. And I'd like to thank Barry again for
It's a
coming down and
pleasure.
talking to us.
Congratulations to
Thank
you.
you very much.
Congratulations on your book.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, here we are again. Now we're in the Cowichan Maritime Center, and the room out at the end of their wharf there. We've got some beautiful boats here, and today we're talking about boats. And Chuck, you have a song about a boat.
I do. I came to this country on a boat, a ship actually.
Absolutely.
The Corinthia, and this song's about how many musicians I bumped into on the island that actually came over on the same boat. Different years, obviously, and you are one of those people.
Isn't it amazing? Because I took the Corinthia from Montreal to England, probably Liverpool, and you took it from?
Liverpool to Montreal.
So there you go.
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
right.
route. Anyway, this is a beautiful song, and it's called
Predetermined.
It was you and there was I, and there were thousands leaving Liverpool the time before we up and sailed that day. On the Corinthia we put to sea, she delivered us to destiny so we could be together here away. Truly believe it's all been predetermined. Can you conceive? It seems that's what's been done. What have I told you? It's in the hands of spirits. Put her up, the Father and the Son. Could have been planets aligned around the sun. We were meant to come together. You two can see, consider how far we've come. Somehow we came here, set here all the better. Joining forces, trading talents, all for one. Trade the ferries for the prairies, and board the boat to Montreal, in Dublin, Dunamana, Donegal. Rolling, roaring ocean, swelling up emotions, reassuring it is divine to felt them all. Can you believe it's all been predetermined? Can you conceive? It seems that's what's been done. What have I told you? It's in the hands of spirits. Put our eye, the Father and the Son. Could have been planets aligned around the sun. Had to be, we were meant to come together. You two can see, consider how far we've come. Somehow we came here, set here all the better. Joining forces, trading talents, all for one. There was me and there was mine, and there was I before we came to you. This Canada that's taken us for our own. You see it in your sky, your mountains high, you take my breath away. This country that has come to be our home. I truly believe it's all been predetermined. Can you conceive? It seems that's what's been done. What have I told you? It's in the hands of spirits. Put our eye, the Father and the Son. Could have been planets aligned around the sun. Had to be, we were meant to come together. You two can see, consider how far we've come. Somehow we came here, set here all the better. Joining forces, trading talents, all for one.
Well, that was fun. I sure enjoyed playing that song. Thank you for writing that song.
No song.
Are you ready, Rusty? Okay, good. Rise again, rise again. Our pain not be lost to knowledge of men. From those that love the best, of the winter till the end. Let the merry round corner rise again. Well, there you are. This is our show about ships and boats, and I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I sure did. And I'd like to thank once again Chuck, my good friend, You might see us come around. We'll go by the name of Sherlock and McCandless.
No, that's McCandless and Sherlock, isn't it?
Sherlock and McCandless. Anyway, here we go. We're going to take you out with Mary Ellen Carter. The owner's father, not a nickel did they spend. Gave 20 years of service, boys, and met her sorry end. But insurance paid the loss to us, so the rest below. They laughed at us and said we had to go. We don't talk to her all winter, some days around the clock. She's worth $250,000, boys, floating at the dock. Now with every jar that hit the bar, we swore we would remain and make the Mary Ellen Carter rise again. Rise again, rise again. Our name not be lost to the knowledge of men. For those that love to rest, those are with her till the end. Let the Mary Ellen Carter rise again. All spring now we've been with her, on march led by a friend. 3 times a day the heart had soothed, twice I've had the bends. That God told me she's the curtains here are slow. I'd never have the strength to go below. We hatch a vent, walk the vent, bar hatch her porthole down. Put girders to her forward up, girded her around. Tomorrow wind will hit the air to help all the strength. Mary Ellen Carter will rise again, rise again, rise again. Our name not be lost to the knowledge of men. For those that love the best, come with her till the end. We'll make the Mary Ellen Carter rise again. For we couldn't leave her there, you see, to crumble into scale. She saved our lives so many times, living through the gale. And all laughing drunken rats left her to a sorry grave. They won't be laughing in another day. And you to adversity has dealt the final blow. With smiling bastards lying to you everywhere you go. Turn to but how long you struggle, parchment's hard and brave. Like Mary Ellen Carter, rise again, rise again, rise again. Though your heart might be lost and life about to end, no matter what you lost, be it a home, a love, friend. Like the Mary Ellen Carter, rise again, rise again, rise again. Though her name not be lost to the knowledge of men. And those that love the best, those are with her till the end. We'll make the Mary Ellen Carter rise again. Wave goodbye to the people, Chuck.
We have it now, Chris? Yeah.
Did you get that, Rusty?
So we got those disparity on the words there.
That's okay.
I think it came off pretty good.
We screwed it up. We did the second one instead of the first one, and then let's just do the end maybe again. I don't know if I can get in there, but so it would be rise again, rise again. Our mind not be lost to the knowledge of. And then what's the other line? Rise again, though your heart it be broken and life about to end. No matter what you lost, be it a home, a love, a friend. Like the Mary Ellen Carter, rise again. Okay, let's do that again. So the two, with the first one first and the second one second. 1, 2. Rise again, rise again. Our name not be lost to the knowledge of men. For those who love the best, and we're with her till the end. We'll make the Mary Ellen Carter rise again, rise again, rise again. Though your heart it be broken and life about to end, no matter what you've lost, be it a home, love, a friend, just like the Mary Ellen Carter, rise again. happy. Good. You get your motor running. Right out on the highway, actually the waterway. It would be the water out of the seas. Here we are at the Cowichan Bay Maritime Center. They've got some beautiful exhibits here. We're in the engine room, as you can see now. There's lots of really interesting old engines. There's a seagull here. It's Johnson's Sea House, I should say. This is the seagull.
Horse.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
that's
Yeah,
a seagull.
right, yeah.
Classic seagull.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
You put that on a little boat and you could go forever.
Yep.
Well, this far anyway.
Will be good collage footage if you're
It is.
putting stuff in.
And is that a diesel engine?